What happens when a CEO trades his corner office for a grease-slicked apron and a pair of tongs? Franklin Sutter built his hot dog business from a single cart downtown to 17 locations across 3 states. He used to know every employee by name, used to clean the grills himself. But things changed. Corporate meetings, expansion deals, investor calls, it all pulled him away from the gritty stuff that made the business thrive. Lately, he'd felt it. A distance. He didn't like it. He'd been getting soft complaints. Not major ones, just enough to make his gut itch. Slow service, bland buns, managers skipping shifts, and worst store 15 in East Fremont had gone through 5 grill workers in 2 months. No explanation stuck. Franklin wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted the truth. So he shaved the beard, dyed his hair darker, wore thick-rimmed glasses, tossed on a fake named Dale, and applied as a trainee through a temp agency they used for emergency staffing. The paperwork passed through corporate's blind process, and within a week, he was scheduled to start at store 15. He'd never met the staff there. That helped. Most of the original crew had turned over. The manager, a guy named Kurt, came in only a few days a week, so Franklin knew he'd mostly be dealing with floor staff. The store was a small walk-up with outdoor seating and a narrow kitchen that ran hot and loud. Franklin showed up early wearing a faded hoodie, jeans, and busted sneakers. He blended in easy. "Hey, you the new guy?" a tall woman with a tied-back ponytail asked, stepping out from the back door. She looked young, maybe 25, but her eyes were sharp. "I'm Naomi. Kurt's not here yet, so I'll get you started." Franklin nodded. "Name's Dale." "Temp thing said I'd start on register," Naomi snorted. "You're grilled today. Miguel called in again. You ever run a flat top?" He gave a shrug. "I've worked in kitchens before." "Good. Gloves are in the drawer." "Keep your station clean, don't burn the dogs, and if a customer's rude, smile through it. That's it." She was fast, direct, and clearly used to filling gaps. Franklin liked her already. The first hour was chaos. Orders stacked up. The fryer oil hadn't been filtered in days. The buns were dry and half the sauces were half empty. Franklin worked silently, flipping dogs, toasting buns, and watching how Naomi handled the line. She did the job of 3 people. She took orders, packed bags, refilled napkins, and somehow remembered regular customers' names. She joked with a kid who dropped his soda, gave an extra dog to a tired-looking delivery guy, and when an older man came up short on cash, she covered it from her own tip jar without blinking. Franklin leaned to her between orders. "You always run the place like this." She gave him a look. "Only when Kurt's not here, which is most days, but someone's gotta keep it from falling apart." By the lunch rush, Franklin was drenched in sweat. The grill hissed nonstop. His wrist cramped from flipping. Still, he kept pace. Naomi noticed. "You're not bad," she said, tossing him a bottle of water. "Most temps can't handle grill. You cooked before." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, owned a food truck once." She grinned. "Explains the wrist flick. You still got it." He caught himself smiling. It had been years since someone complimented him on actual work, not spreadsheets or strategy, just flipping dogs. Then a tall man in a polo strolled in from the back alley, sunglasses pushed up on his head. "Yo, Naomi, you got the keys. I'm heading out." Naomi frowned. "You just got here." "Yeah, well, got stuff to do." Kurt glanced at Franklin. "This the new temp, whatever, as long as he doesn't screw up." Franklin kept his mouth shut. When Kurt left 10 minutes later, Naomi just shook her head. "That's how it is. He clocks in, vanishes, then chews us out during Friday meetings." Franklin asked carefully, "Does corporate know?" Naomi shrugged. "Tried reporting it last month. The district guy said he'd look into it, but nothing's changed. So I just keep grinding." By 3 p.m., Franklin's shirt clung to his back, but the kitchen was spotless. Orders were out fast, customers were happy, and Naomi was still flying. He watched her refill sauces without being asked, fix the squeaky freezer door with a butter knife, and pause just long enough to check if he needed a break. She didn't treat him like a temp. She treated him like a teammate, and that's when it hit him. This woman was holding the place together. Kurt was a ghost. Corporate hadn't noticed, but Naomi. She was the reason store 15 hadn't gone under. When the shift ended, she handed him a cold soda and nodded toward the alley. "Take 5, Dale." "You earned it." Franklin stepped outside, heart pounding not from the heat but from everything he'd seen. Store 15 wasn't broken. It was being buried under bad management and saved every day by someone who'd never been given credit. He looked down at his hands, still stained from the grill. Tomorrow he'd be back, but not just to work. He needed to dig deeper, see how far this went. Because Naomi deserved more than a pat on the back, she deserved a shot. Franklin returned the next morning before sunrise, just as the delivery truck was easing its way into the cramped alley behind Store 15. He didn't knock. He had seen Naomi unlock the back door the morning before and figured she'd be doing it again. She was. "Morning," she said, holding the door open with her knee, clipboard in hand. Her hair was still damp at the ends like she'd rushed from a shower. "You're early." Franklin stepped inside. "Figured I'd help with prep." Naomi handed him a box of onions. "You're the first temp I've seen show up before me. You sure you're not spying on us?" "I'm not that interesting," Franklin said, moving toward the prep counter. "I just want to do the job right." She didn't press. She had too much to do. Franklin watched her scan the delivery sheets. She caught 3 missing items before the driver even unloaded them. By the time the sun hit the sidewalk, the back fridge was organized, prep was 80% done, and the first scheduled employee walked in, yawning and rubbing his neck. "Kitchen's already half set," the young man said, looking around. "Naomi, did you sleep here or something?" "Nope. Dale showed up early. He helped." She didn't look up from slicing tomatoes. The guy, Ali, according to his apron, gave Franklin a thumbs up and disappeared into the back room. Within minutes, another worker slipped in, then another, and by 8:30 the kitchen was humming. Franklin took the register this time, letting Naomi handle grill. He wanted to observe customer flow, timing, and how the crew handled pressure from this side. A woman in her 50s with a company badge approached the window and ordered 6 different things, all customized. Franklin tapped her order in carefully. When he handed her the receipt, she paused and looked him up and down. "You knew?" she asked. "Just started yesterday. You seem smarter than most of the kids they throw behind this counter. Don't let this place drain you," he smiled politely. "I'll keep that in mind." She took her bag and left. Franklin felt a strange tightness in his chest, not from the comment, but from the implication. People didn't expect much from this store. That meant somewhere along the line, expectations had dropped. Mid-morning, Franklin noticed a shift. Kurt walked in, again with sunglasses on his head, again acting like he belonged everywhere and nowhere. He leaned on the prep counter and called out, "Naomi, why's the sauce count off? We were short 3 bottles this week." Naomi didn't glance away from the grill. "It's on the delivery sheet." "They didn't send them, so call and fix it." "Already did." Kurt huffed and turned to Franklin. "You're Dale, right? You the one who was early?" "Yes." Kurt narrowed his eyes. "You work full-time." "Temp agency just sends me where I'm needed." Kurt seemed unimpressed. "If you're sticking around, learn fast. I don't have time to babysit." Naomi didn't speak, but Franklin noticed her jaw tighten. Kurt left a few minutes later without checking a single station. By afternoon, Franklin excused himself to use the restroom and slipped into the back office. He'd memorized the basic layout yesterday. The office was cramped and smelled faintly of bleach and burnt oil. He noticed 2 things immediately. The schedule taped to the wall had Kurt listed for 40 hours, but from what he'd seen, he barely stayed 2 hours per day. More importantly, the labor logbook showed altered clock-ins. Someone had moved Naomi's hours down on 3 different days the previous week. He took pictures with the burner phone he'd brought in his sock. The manipulation was clear. Back on the floor, Naomi was restocking the pickle bins. "Kurt usually handle payroll too?" Franklin asked casually. "Yeah, why? Just wondering. Seems like a lot for one person." Naomi gave a short laugh. "If he actually did it, maybe, but most of us know better than to expect fairness from that guy." Franklin kept his voice even. "Anyone ever talk to HR?" "Twice. First time was about scheduling. Second time was bigger tip pooling issues and missing hours." "What happened?" She wiped her hands on a towel. "We got told Kurt was within his discretion. After that, people stopped speaking up." Franklin nodded slowly. "You don't seem like someone who gives up easily." "I don't. But I also don't throw myself at walls hoping they'll fall." She walked back to the grill without waiting for a reply. An hour later, a man in a pressed shirt and name badge stepped into the kitchen. Franklin recognized him immediately. Jacob Heller, regional manager. He hadn't been expected. "Surprise check-in," Jacob announced, walking past the fryer, "just making sure things are running smooth." Naomi didn't flinch. "We're good." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "That's so." "Because I've been hearing about recurring supply issues and inconsistent staffing." She didn't answer. Jacob turned to Franklin. "You knew," started yesterday. "Well, don't get too comfortable. This store's turnover rate is the highest in the region. We're trying to fix that, but some people don't want to be helped." Franklin kept his expression neutral. "Seems like a good crew to me." Jacob ignored the comment. He spent the next 20 minutes poking around, asking off-handed questions and jotting notes. When he left, Naomi exhaled sharply. "He only shows up when there's a threat of audit," she said. "He won't fix anything, just wants to say he checked in." Franklin didn't reply. He was processing. Between what he'd seen in the office and what just happened now, it was becoming painfully clear the problems weren't just Kurt. They were systemic. Later that evening, while Naomi was cleaning the fryer, a task usually done by Kurt, according to the checklist, Franklin leaned against the counter. "You ever think about managing one of these?" She looked up. "Why, you quitting already?" "No," he said, "just curious." "You're clearly keeping this place afloat." "I don't have a degree. That's what they told me last time I applied." "You think that matters here?" She wiped her hands. "Yeah, they want someone they can mold, not someone who already knows how things work." Franklin nodded slowly. "If that changed, would you try again?" She looked at him for a second, unsure. "Maybe, if it wasn't just talk." The fryer hissed again, and the moment passed. As they closed down, Franklin caught a younger worker, Ryan, trying to sneak out early without doing his closing duties. Naomi spotted it and called him back. "You left the sauce wells half full and didn't wipe the counters," Ryan groaned. "It's not a big deal, Dale can do it." "No, you were assigned closing, come back and finish." Ryan stared at her. "You're not the manager, you're right. But I am the one who'll report this." He hesitated, then stomped back to the counter and started wiping aggressively. Franklin watched the exchange. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She just held the line. And the crew, even the lazy ones, seemed to respect that. As Ryan left, he mumbled something under his breath. Franklin caught the words. "Bossy chick thinks she runs the place." Franklin stepped in front of him. "What did you say?" Ryan looked up, startled. "Nothing, just tired. Clock out. Don't come back tomorrow." Ryan blinked. "What?" "I'll explain to Kurt. You're done. You're a temp. You can't try me." Ryan looked at Naomi, then back at Franklin, weighing his options. He slammed his locker and left without another word. Naomi stared at Franklin, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She studied him carefully, suspicion creeping into her eyes. "You're not just some guy from a temp agency, are you?" Franklin didn't answer, not yet. He took off his apron and hung it on the hook. "See you tomorrow," she hesitated. "Yeah. I guess so." Franklin stepped into the alley as the door swung closed behind him. The air was cooling, but he felt heat rising in his chest. He wasn't just seeing dysfunction. He was watching it suffocate the best people in his company, and it was time something changed. Franklin arrived just before the lunch rush. No apron, no hoodie, no fake name. He stepped through the front entrance as customers filtered in, looked around the cramped dining area, then locked eyes with Naomi behind the counter. She was manning both register and grill again, hands moving fast, her jaw set tight. Another worker, Illy, was folding napkins at the prep table with a speed that suggested he'd had too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Naomi froze when she saw Franklin. Not because he looked different, he didn't, but because he wasn't in uniform, and he carried himself like someone who'd stopped pretending. He walked past the counter, ignoring the surprised glances from customers, and pushed into the back hallway that led to the office. The door was locked, but he had the master key. He opened it, stepped inside, and waited. Kurt showed up 15 minutes later, sunglasses tucked into the collar of his shirt, holding a smoothie cup and tapping at his phone. He didn't look up until he stepped into the office and saw Franklin seated in his chair. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Franklin stood. "Close the door." Kurt glanced at the master key in Franklin's hand, then at his face. Something flickered behind his eyes, recognition maybe, or fear. Who are you? I'm Franklin Sutter. I own this company. Kurt's mouth opened then closed. He didn't sit down. You went undercover? I've been on your floor the last 2 days. I worked the grill, ran register, and cleaned your fryer. I know exactly how this store runs. Kurt bristled. Look, if this is about the schedule, it's about everything. You're scheduled for full weeks, but you're barely here. You've altered clock-ins, underreported hours for your lead, and ignored repeated supply issues. I've seen the logs. I've seen you walk out while your crew gets slammed. I've been managing 3 stores. You're not managing this one. Kurt leaned against the filing cabinet. You think you can just walk in and fire me? I'm not thinking about it. You're done. Effective immediately. Kurt's voice dropped. I've been with this company 6 years. And in that time, you've made yourself comfortable and left the work to people who weren't given your title or your pay. You've been warned before. HR has notes. I've seen them. You buried this place. Kurt stared at him, then gave a short laugh. You'll regret this. Nobody else wants this job. Franklin turned to the desk, pulled out the employee handbook, and set it on top. Naomi does. She just hasn't been given the chance. Kurt didn't respond. The silence stretched until he reached into his pocket, grabbed his keys, and dropped them on the desk. You'll burn this place down without me. Franklin didn't look up. It's already been on fire. You were just too far away to feel the heat. Kurt left without another word. Franklin waited until he heard the main door click shut before he stepped out. Naomi was still on grill, a line of customers stretching out the door. Illy glanced over and nodded toward the back. You good? Franklin motioned subtly. Take a break. I'll help Naomi. He washed his hands at the prep sink, grabbed gloves, and slid next to her at the grill. She didn't say anything. He waited until the next order was packed and handed off. I told Kurt who I am. She kept her eyes on the spatula. Figured. You said too much last night. He's gone. That made her stop. Gone, fired, effective immediately. She turned, visibly shaken. You don't waste time, neither do you. She stepped away from the grill, peeled off her gloves, and leaned against the prep table. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, but I need to ask you something. She looked up. I want you to run this store, not as a token promotion. I want to give you the title, the pay, the authority. You've already been doing the work. Naomi let out a sharp breath and dropped her gaze to the floor. There are better people than me, she said. I haven't seen them. I've been to all 17 locations. No one runs tighter or cleaner than you. No one holds the line like you do. She didn't respond. He lowered his voice. This isn't a favor. This is recognition. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. You fix the wages. I already sent payroll the logs. You'll be compensated for every missed hour. And I've flagged the manipulation. It won't happen again. She nodded once, then turned back to the grill. Illy returned from the back, took one look at Naomi's face, then glanced at Franklin. Something happened. Franklin handed him a new ticket. We just got leadership back. The rest of the afternoon moved fast. Word of Kurt's departure spread among the crew after Naomi quietly pulled them into the back and explained the shift. Some looked stunned, others relieved, but no one objected. By closing time, the kitchen was spotless. Bins were labeled. The sauce levels were checked without being asked. Even Ryan's replacement, a nervous-looking kid named Marcus, had found his rhythm. Franklin stayed behind as the shutters came down. Naomi was counting the drawer. The total was higher than usual. Customers noticed, she said. They always do, they just don't always say it. She placed the cash into the drop safe, then turned. I don't want this store to be about me. It won't be. I want it to be about good work, about showing up. You're the one who sets that tone. She crossed her arms. What happens next? I'll be back in 2 weeks, not as a mystery guest, as your boss. We'll go over hiring, policies, shift structure. I'll help you get a second in command. You shouldn't have to run this place solo. She nodded slowly. And after that, the rest of the stores. I've got work to do. She gave him a look that wasn't approval or gratitude. It was something quieter, something earned. You should have done this a long time ago. He didn't argue. I know. She locked the safe, hung up her apron, and grabbed her bag. As they stepped out into the cooling air, Franklin glanced back at the shuttered window. The place looked different already, not because the sign had changed, but because the person behind the counter finally had a key to the front door. Naomi pulled her car keys from her jacket. You sticking around? For now. You working tomorrow? No, you are. She gave him a half smile and walked to her car. Franklin stood there for a while, watching as the lot emptied. This wasn't about hot dogs. It never had been. It was about people, and he had a lot of them left to meet. Franklin returned to store 2 weeks later. This time, he parked around back not to sneak in, but to avoid drawing attention to himself. He didn't want a scene. He wanted to see how things had held up now that the dust had settled and real work had begun. The place looked cleaner. That struck him first. The alley had been swept. The delivery crates were stacked neatly instead of scattered like they'd been. Someone had even scrubbed the back door. It wasn't new, but it showed care. Inside, the kitchen was busy, but not frantic. Naomi stood near the prep table, clipboard in hand, reviewing the midday rotation with a young woman who looked barely out of high school. Ellie was at the grill, focused but not tense. The fryer hissed steadily. Nothing was rushed. Everyone moved with purpose, like they knew what they were doing and didn't have to prove it every second. Franklin stepped in quietly, nodded at Ellie, and waited by the walk-in. Naomi noticed him halfway through giving instructions on portioning. "You're early," she said, walking over. "I wanted to get a feel for the store before the shift change. I figured you'd be in a collared shirt by now. I forgot how good it feels to walk into a kitchen that works." Naomi crossed her arms. "It's not perfect, but it's better." He gestured toward the clipboard. "You building your own prep schedule?" "Yeah, I stopped using the standard one. Too much waste. We were throwing out almost a full tray of onions every day." Franklin nodded. "You track it. I've got a log. I'll show you." He followed her to the back office. The room hadn't changed much physically, but the wall above the desk now had a whiteboard with color-coded shifts, delivery dates, and prep cycles. A smaller board listed goals. Customer wait time under 4 minutes, 0 walkouts. Fryer oil changed every 48 hours. Franklin studied it. "You've been busy." Naomi placed the clipboard down. "I asked for a new assistant manager last week, someone internal." "Who?" "Illy." "Why? He's consistent, doesn't complain, picks up slack without being asked." "He's not loud, but people listen to him when it counts." Franklin leaned against the edge of the desk. "You think he's ready?" "He doesn't think he is. That's usually a good sign." He gave a short nod. "Approved. Start him on training next week. He'll shadow you on ordering and scheduling." Naomi didn't smile. She just wrote it down like every other item on her list. He waited a moment before speaking again. "You've earned a raise." She looked up. "I already got the manager pay bump. This is on top of that. You're outperforming every other store in the region. That fast. It's not just the numbers. Supplier complaints dropped. Customers are leaving positive feedback without being asked. And your turnover rate, 0 since the change." Naomi closed the notebook. "I've been doing this job for years. Difference is now someone's actually watching." Franklin didn't argue. "I'm also setting up performance bonuses. Quarterly based on store benchmarks. You hit targets, your team gets a cut." She hesitated. "All of them. Everyone on payroll, that matters." He nodded once. "I want more managers like you, but I also want to reward the crews that hold the line." Naomi glanced toward the kitchen. "They're not used to being noticed. Neither were you." She didn't reply. Instead, she picked up a folder from the drawer and handed it to him. "What's this?" "Incident reports from before you came. Stuff that never made it past Kurt." He opened it. The first few pages were handwritten notes. Harassment between workers, tip skimming, shift swaps approved without consent. None of it had been escalated. Some reports had been signed, then crossed out in red ink. Franklin flipped through the pages slowly. "Why didn't you send this sooner?" Didn't think anyone would read it. He tucked the folder under his arm. "I'll take care of it." Naomi returned to the kitchen. Franklin followed, watching as she stepped behind the counter and grabbed a headset from the hook. "Lunch rush is in 15. Let's tighten up," she called out. No one dragged their feet. Illy finished wiping the counter and moved to grill. The new girl adjusted the drink station. A fourth team member, Marcus, checked the sauce bins without being prompted. Franklin stood beside the register, observing the pace. Customers started lining up. Orders came in quick. 2 regulars got greeted by name. A woman with 3 kids was offered extra napkins and a seat near the fan. The systems were humming not because of automation, but because people were engaged. 2 hours later, as the crowd thinned, Franklin stepped outside for a call with the HR director. He relayed what he'd found in the folder, gave specific names, and instructed that every report be reviewed and documented. Anyone still employed who'd ignored or altered complaints would be formally investigated, starting with Kurt's replacement at another store. It wasn't just about fixing Store 15. It was about purging the rot that had been covered with policy and silence. When he returned, Naomi was reviewing the closing checklist with Marcus. The kid looked nervous. "You're not in trouble," she said. "You're just not folding the wrap paper tight enough. It leaks. Customers notice. I'll redo them. No, watch me do 3, then you try again." Franklin leaned against the prep table. "You always this patient, only when they care. You think he does." He showed up early today. First time, Franklin waited until Marcus stepped away. "What about the rest of your team? I've got 1 week link. Not lazy, just distracted. I'm giving her another week. After that, I'll decide." "You need more people. I could use 1 more weekend closer." "But I'd rather run short than hire the wrong person." He tapped the edge of the prep table. "I trust your judgment." She looked at him. "You should. You hired a lot of the wrong ones before." Fair. He didn't deflect. Later, as the sun dipped low and the dining area emptied out, Franklin held the front door open while Naomi locked up. She double-checked the chain on the side gate before pocketing the keys. He turned to her. "You said something the first day I met you. That someone had to keep it from falling apart." "Yeah, I remember. It's not falling apart anymore," she shrugged. "Ask me again in 6 months," he smiled. "I will." They walked to the lot in silence, no fanfare, no big speeches. Just 2 people who had finally cleared the smoke and stood inside a business that didn't just serve food, but dignity. As Franklin drove off, he passed a group of teenagers eating on the curb outside the next block, one of them holding a branded soda cup from Store 15. They were laughing, passing fries between them, careless and happy. That was the point, not the fries, not the brand, but the space behind the counter that made that kind of moment possible. It had taken too long, but it was finally right.